To sporting matters now, where the sector plays a major role in the development of every country. Sport has the unique ability to transcend cultural barriers, also fostering a sense of belonging and pride among individuals. Now, to help us understand how sport also transcends political barriers, we're now joined by Professor Michael Goldman from the Sport Management Department at the University of San Francisco. Prof, a pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Well, you've noted that sports has played a significant role in historical events such as the ancient Olympics and also the 1995 Rugby World Cup in South Africa. How do these historical examples illustrate the power of sports in really unifying nations during times of division or even conflict?
Well, absolutely. We know in South Africa and the US here and around the world that it's big events like this where our heroes have an opportunity to make us proud, give us an opportunity to wave the flag in a very positive way and build some positive nation building that many countries around the world really require. And so I think it's a critical component of what we refer to as soft power, the way in which countries influence each other, the way in which internally and externally, it's a great opportunity, as you said, for nation building and for people to come together and to put differences aside sometimes and have one positive unifying force, which is the support of those representing us, our identity, our country, our flag, as they compete against the rest of the world. And externally, in terms of soft power, it's the opportunity for countries to influence others and for South Africa to have a stronger, foot forward as they interact with the rest of Africa and other countries through the performance of their athletes.
So in your view, how does sports then contribute to the formation of national identity or even cultural cohesion, particularly in diverse or newly unified nations?
Absolutely. As you say, if we think back to South Africa in 1995, we think about the German Soccer World Cup before our World Cup in 2010. We see a number of instances where we know well that many of the differences that we experience on a day-to-day basis, based on categories such as race or gender or income or geography or any of these ways in which we sometimes artificially divide ourselves within society, we can put those aside for a few moments, for a few hours, for a few days, and we can get behind something that unifies us. And that's a very powerful force. Humans like to belong. And although we sometimes divide ourselves into smaller groups, the opportunity to come together and unify and belong around one national identity. The thing about these events and the way in which our heroes represent us is they give meaning to the idea of nationhood. What does it mean to be South African? What does it mean to be American? We've seen in the Olympics over the last few days and weeks, right? What does Team South Africa or Team USA mean? Well, it means the actions, behaviors, attitudes, the ways in which our heroes have portrayed themselves. We see ourselves through that, and that gives us the words, the images, the meaning that we can take on board to be stronger Americans or South Africans or whatever the country might be. So in that way, it gives us the language, it gives us the symbolism, it gives us the example to put some of the differences aside and come together under a flag, a unifying, positive way of thinking about our identity.
Prof, what would you say are some of the most compelling examples of how investing in sports, or actually sports infrastructure, has led to economic growth and even development for a nation? Can you provide any recent examples that really illustrate these benefits?
Well, the minute you talk about infrastructure, we often think about, the FIFA World Cup in South Africa, the Olympic investments, be they London or Paris now. I think the one big caveat to start with is that if we're building sports infrastructure just for one event and it doesn't benefit the rest of society, the citizens, the people who actually live there, the returns are actually negative. And although we have increased in tourism, we see the displacement effect in tourism playing out in Paris right now, where you would have seen some of the reports over the last few days of less tourists coming to Paris than usual. Why? Because there's all these Olympic tourists that are there and they crowd out. So, there's good with bad when we think about these events and the infrastructure. Barcelona is a great example back in the 90s of using Olympic infrastructure for multiple domestic and international events after the fact. I know South Africa has tried to do that a number of times.
Yeah.
The LA Olympics in 2028 is definitely trying to take advantage of previous infrastructural investments. And if countries are able to make that investment spread over multiple events, especially if they're able to make those investments useful to the population, telecommunications, transportation, other services, that has a higher return on investment.
But how can sports then be used as a tool to advance issues such as gender equality, for instance? And what specific initiatives or programs have been particularly successful in this regard?
I think we've certainly seen the raising of issues and awareness of our prejudices and our blind spots around issues like gender that have again come to the fore during the Paris Olympics. We've seen the story before. And so I think whether it's in the boxing environment, whether it's in the track and field, athletic environment, these really great athletes who happen to be women and happen to be doing really well, but challenge some of the preconceived ideas that some people have. And I think that is really critical in terms of addressing some of these prejudices. So it's important that we talk about the ways in which different parts of society are responding to these great athletic performances by women in women competitions, and that we surface some of these misunderstandings and confusions. And I think that's part of taking it forward. I think the programs that are put together by broadcasters, by sponsors, by national federations to support the education of everyone through dialogue when these situations come to the fore, I think that's a really important piece of it. And we've seen that in the US, for example, with USA Rugby. We have athletes in the USA women's rugby team that are really challenging how a lot of Americans think about women athletes and their rugby team. And I think that has been very, very useful. And USA Rugby has leaned into that and used it as an opportunity to continue to challenge those assumptions.
I want to return to an issue that you touched on a bit earlier. Can you elaborate on the role of sports, especially in sports diplomacy, if you will, in fostering this international relations and peace as well? Are there any recent examples where sports diplomacy has really successfully bridged political or cultural divides?
Yeah, I think soft power has been used by all countries to leverage the hosting of events and their athletic teams to achieve some of these diplomatic objectives. So South Africa certainly did that in 2010 as they brought the world to the continent and to South Africa specifically. We've seen lots of debates about other Olympic hosts that have done that. The USA has done that many times. China did that around their Olympics. The Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai, have all been playing the same game, which is using sport as a way to both attract people to your country, to change the perceptions they have about your country and its people, and then also to have a seat at the table and to have greater influence. So Saudi Arabia is one that certainly is getting a lot of attention in the US right now, be it in golf or in Formula One or in other sports, there's some discomfort. There are some questions around whether Saudi Arabia should be playing that kind of role in global sport, but that's certainly being effective for Saudi Arabia in shifting some of the perceptions that some may have of that country. So, whether you view the countries involved positively or negatively, the same game is being played. It is using sport, whether it's performance or events, to shift perceptions that others have of that environment.
And as we conclude our conversation, how do governments then use major sports events to really project a positive image or even distract from political issues? Can you very quickly provide examples of both successful but also problematic uses of sports for political purpose?
Sure. I think, I mentioned some of the recent hosts. I think the UK with London did a really excellent job. China, certainly with their Olympics, I think did a great job. Rwanda's interesting to kind of look beyond Olympics. So Rwanda hosting with the NBA, the Basketball Africa League, the fifth league essentially for the NBA, is a really interesting case study. Rwanda has, with their Arsenal sponsorship, as we know, played that global branding, soft power sponsorship game to influence the way many in the world see Rwanda. And politically, we know the UK's relationship with Rwanda in the previous government was really positive, perhaps through some of those interactions. The US has an interesting relationship with Rwanda, again, through sport and through aid. And so Rwanda stepping up and hosting the final of the Basketball Africa League during COVID as a closed area was great for the NBA, great for Basketball Africa. Certainly some question marks around Rwanda's previous human rights record. And so that has created some difficulties, or certainly some question for the NBA. And I think that's the interesting piece, right? So Rwanda is certainly using soft power successfully, although some people see through it in the same way that you could say greenwashing or sports washing. There are those that will see through the technique that's being used, but the technique by itself can be very effective, and in these examples has been very effective.
Professor Goldman, let me thank you for your time and really sharing your insights into the intricate relationship between sports, politics, and even nation building.